The wanted posters went up on the same morning. Frost painted the windows of every tavern and trading post from Millhaven to the northern timber camps. And Bennett Frost stood in the muddy street staring at a face he had seen only once before, but would never forget. The parchment showed crude but effective lines depicting an orc woman with wide-set eyes and a distinctive scar cutting through her left eyebrow, and beneath the drawing were words that made his stomach clench. Wanted for murder and theft. Reward 500 gold sovereigns, dead or alive. Bennett crumpled the edge of the poster he had torn down, shoving it deep into his coat pocket as he turned away from the crowd gathering around the town notice board. The autumn air bit at his cheeks as he walked with deliberate calm toward the edge of Millhaven, past the blacksmith shop where the clang of hammer on anvil punctuated the morning, past the mill where grain dust hung in golden clouds, past the last row of cottages, until he reached the dirt road that led to his farm 3 miles north. His heart hammered against his ribs with each step, but his face remained carefully blank, the same expression he had worn during his years as a soldier before he had come home to work his father's land. The farm sat in a shallow valley surrounded by pine forest, 40 acres of fields now harvested and bare, a weathered barn, a chicken coop, and the small stone house his grandfather had built 50 years ago. Bennett had lived alone here for 3 years since his father's death, content with the isolation that others in town pitied. He kept to himself, sold his wheat and vegetables at market, and bothered no one. It was the kind of life that allowed a man to keep secrets. He approached the house from the eastern side, scanning the tree line out of habit before unlocking the heavy oak door. Inside, the main room was dim and cold, the hearth reduced to ash from the morning fire. Bennett moved quickly to the kitchen area, pushing aside the worn rug near the pantry to reveal the wooden trapdoor set into the floor. He lifted it with both hands, revealing steep stairs descending into darkness. "It's me," he called down softly. "I'm coming down." He grabbed the lantern from its hook by the door, lit it with shaking hands, and descended into the root cellar. The underground room was perhaps 12 feet square, lined with stone walls and shelves stocked with preserved vegetables, salted meat, and sacks of grain. In the far corner, sitting on a pile of blankets with her knees drawn up to her chest, was the orc woman from the wanted poster. Karzha looked up at him with eyes the color of dark amber, her green skin appearing almost gray in the lantern light. She was smaller than most orc women Bennett had encountered during the war, perhaps 5.5 feet tall, with a lean, athletic build that spoke of hard travel and harder living. Her black hair was cropped short and uneven, as though she had cut it herself with a dull knife. The tusks that curved up from her lower jaw were small and delicate, giving her face a fierce beauty that had struck him the first time he had found her collapsed in his northern field 2 weeks ago. "They have put up posters," Bennett said, setting the lantern on a shelf. "Your face is all over town. The bounty is 500 gold. Karzha's expression did not change, but her hands tightened on the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Then you should turn me in. That is more money than you will make in 5 years farming. I told you I wouldn't do that." Bennett sat down on a barrel of apples, running his hands through his dark blonde hair. "But we need to be more careful now. Bounty hunters will be coming through, asking questions, searching properties. You cannot make any noise during the day, and I will need to move supplies down here so I do not have to come down as often." "Why are you doing this?" Karzha asked, and it was not the first time she had posed the question. "You do not know me. You do not know if what they say I did is true." Bennett met her gaze steadily. "I know you were half dead when I found you. I know someone had beaten you badly enough to crack your ribs. I know you had arrow wounds in your back, which means whoever shot you did it while you were running away. That tells me enough." "It tells you I am a fugitive," Karzha said. "Nothing more. It tells me you are in trouble, and I am not the kind of man who turns away someone who needs help." Bennett stood, brushing dust from his trousers. "I brought down more blankets last night, and I will get you warmer clothes. It's going to be a cold winter, and this cellar gets damp when the ground freezes." "Bennett," Karzha's voice stopped him at the base of the stairs. "If they find me here, they will hang you beside me. You understand this?" "I understand," Bennett said quietly. "Get some rest. I will bring dinner down after dark." He climbed the stairs and closed the trapdoor, replacing the rug with careful precision. His hands were steady now, the initial panic from seeing the posters fading into the calm determination that had seen him through 3 years of brutal warfare. He had survived ambushes and sieges, had seen friends die, and had killed men himself in the name of a king he barely remembered. Hiding one orc woman from bounty hunters seemed almost simple by comparison. Almost. The reality of what he had committed to settled over him as he moved through the house, stoking the fire and preparing a simple lunch of bread and cheese. He had no grand plan, no scheme for getting Karzha to safety. He had simply acted on instinct when he found her in his field, had carried her unconscious body to his cellar and tended her wounds without thinking about the consequences. Now those consequences were papered all over town, and he would need to be smarter if they were both going to survive. Bennett spent the afternoon working in the barn, repairing a broken section of stall and organizing his tools for winter. The familiar physical labor helped quiet his mind, let him think through the problems ahead. Food would not be an issue. He had laid in enough supplies to see himself through the winter with plenty to spare. Water he could bring down in buckets without arousing suspicion. The real danger would come from visitors, from the inevitable searches that would happen when the bounty hunters arrived in force. He was hammering the last nail into a new board when he heard the sound of horses approaching. Bennett set down his hammer and walked out of the barn with studied casualness, shading his eyes against the late afternoon sun. 3 riders were coming up the road, and even from a distance, he could see the hard look of professional hunters about them. They wore mismatched armor and carried an assortment of weapons, the kind of men who made their living in violence and called it justice. "Afternoon," Bennett called out as they reined in their horses in his yard. "Can I help you?" The lead rider was a scarred man with a graying beard and cold blue eyes. He held up one of the wanted posters. "Looking for this orc. Goes by the name Karzha. Murdered a merchant and his family up in Thornhaven, made off with a strong box of gold. You seen anyone matching this description?" "No," Bennett said, keeping his voice level and bored. "I do not get many visitors out here, orc or otherwise." "When did this happen?" 3 weeks back, another rider said, a younger man with a bow strapped to his back. "She was tracked south to the river, then the trail went cold." "Could be she is hiding in these hills." "Could be," Bennett agreed. "But I have not seen her. You are welcome to check my barn if you like. Just me and my chickens out here." The lead rider studied him with the kind of scrutiny that came from years of reading Men for Lies. Bennett met his gaze calmly, every inch the simple farmer with nothing to hide. Finally, the man nodded. "We will take you up on that. No offense meant, but we need to be thorough. That is a lot of gold on her head." "None taken," Bennett said, gesturing toward the barn. "Help yourselves." He stood in the yard while the 3 men dismounted and searched his barn, keeping his breathing slow and even. His mind raced through the details of the cellar, reassuring himself that there was no visible sign of Karzha's presence. The trapdoor was hidden beneath the rug, the cellar itself sealed and soundproof. Unless they tore up his floorboards, they would find nothing. The bounty hunters emerged after 10 minutes, the lead man shaking his head. "Clean. You keep a neat operation here, Frost. That is your name, right?" "I remember seeing you at the market." "That is right," Bennett said. "I sell my wheat there every harvest." "Good wheat, too," the younger hunter said. "My mother buys from you. Tell her I appreciate the business." Bennett smiled slightly. "Will you be searching many farms?" "Every one between here and the border," the lead hunter said, mounting his horse. "That orc is somewhere in these hills, and someone is going to collect that reward. If you do see anything, there is a marshal's office in Millhaven. They are coordinating the search." "I will keep my eyes open," Bennett promised. He watched them ride away, waiting until they disappeared around the bend in the road before allowing himself to release the breath he had been holding. That had been the first test, and they had passed it. But there would be more, many more, if Karzha was truly wanted for murder. The bounty hunters would not give up easily, not with 500 gold sovereigns at stake. Bennett waited until full dark before preparing dinner. He made a thick stew with salted pork and root vegetables, filling 2 bowls and grabbing a fresh loaf of bread. He carried the food down to the cellar, finding Karzha awake and alert in the lamplight. "There were voices," she said. "Above." "Bounty hunters," Bennett confirmed, handing her a bowl and spoon. "They searched the barn but did not come in the house. They are going farm to farm." Karzha accepted the food with a slight nod of thanks. "This cannot continue. Every day I stay here is another day you risk your life." "We have been through this." Bennett sat down across from her, digging into his own stew. "You cannot travel in your condition, and even if you could, they have hunters tracking every road. You would not make it 5 miles. Then what do you propose?" Karzha ate slowly, and Bennett noticed she was moving less stiffly than she had even a few days ago. Her ribs were healing, the arrow wounds in her back scabbing over cleanly. She was resilient, he would give her that. "We wait out the winter," Bennett said. "Once the snow starts, the bounty hunters will give up the search. They are not going to freeze in the woods for a chance at finding you. Come spring, we can figure out a way to get you somewhere safe. Maybe west to the territories where orcs and humans trade peacefully, or south to the port cities where you could buy passage on a ship. And you think they will simply forget about me when spring comes?" Karzha's tone was skeptical but not unkind. "I think the active search will die down," Bennett said. "Bounty hunters need to eat too. They will not spend months looking for someone who might be long gone. The posters will stay up, sure, but you could change your appearance, travel at night. It is not perfect, but it is better than running now." Karzha was silent for a long moment, her amber eyes studying him in the flickering lamplight. "You were a soldier," she said finally. "I can tell by the way you move, the way you think tactically. Why did you leave?" "Because I got tired of killing," Bennett said simply. "Because I saw what war does to people, orc and human alike, and I wanted no more part of it. I came home to work the land my grandfather cleared, to live quietly and hurt no one. That is all." "And yet you risk everything to hide an orc in your cellar." Karzha shook her head slightly. "You are a strange man, Bennett Frost. Maybe." Bennett finished his stew and set the bowl aside. "Or maybe I just remember that most of the orcs I fought were fighting to protect their homes, same as we were. War makes everyone into monsters for a while. Does not mean we have to stay that way." He thought he saw something shift in Karzha's expression, a softening around her eyes, but the light was too dim to be certain. "Did you kill orc soldiers?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Bennett said, seeing no point in lying. "And they killed plenty of humans. It was war. We did what we had to do to survive. And now you are trying to keep one of us alive." Karzha's laugh was short and bitter. "The world is full of strange circles. I suppose it is." Bennett stood, collecting the empty bowls. I will bring breakfast before dawn, before there is any chance of more visitors. Try to sleep. You are still healing. Bennett. Karzha's voice caught him again at the stairs. Thank you. I know I do not say it often enough, but thank you. You are welcome, Bennett said, and climbed back up into the house. The pattern established itself over the following weeks as autumn deepened into early winter. Bennett woke before dawn to bring Karzha breakfast and fresh water, spent his days working on winter repairs and maintaining the appearance of normalcy, and brought dinner down after sunset when they would talk quietly in the lamplight. The bounty hunters came twice more, searching with increasing frustration as their quarry remained elusive. Each time Bennett played the role of the cooperative farmer with nothing to hide, and each time they left empty-handed. The first snow fell in late November, fat white flakes that blanketed the valley and muffled all sound. Bennett stood at his window watching it accumulate, feeling some of the tension ease from his shoulders. The snow would make travel difficult, would drive the casual bounty hunters back to warm taverns and easier prey. They were not safe, not by any measure, but they had bought themselves time. He carried extra blankets down to the cellar that evening, along with a thick wool coat he had purchased in town. Karzha was doing exercises when he descended, carefully stretching her healed ribs and testing her range of motion. She had gained back some of the weight she had lost to injury and starvation, and her green skin had regained its healthy luster. It is snowing, Bennett announced, setting down the blankets and coat. The pass to the north will be closed within a week, and the roads will be difficult until spring. Karzha stopped her exercises, a flicker of relief crossing her face. So the hunters will leave. Most of them, Bennett agreed. There may be a few diehards who stick around, but the serious professionals will move on to warmer climates and easier work. We should be relatively safe until the thaw. Relatively, Karzha repeated with a slight smile. You always qualify your statements, have you noticed that? You never say anything is certain. Because nothing is certain, Bennett said, returning her smile. I learned that in the war. The moment you assume you are safe is usually when an arrow finds you. A cheerful philosophy. Karzha picked up the wool coat, examining it with approval. This is good quality, it must have cost you. I can afford it, Bennett said. And I cannot have you freezing to death down here after all the trouble I have gone through to keep you alive. Karzha pulled on the coat, and despite the situation, Bennett felt a small warmth in his chest seeing her bundled against the cold. She looked almost peaceful, a far cry from the half-dead fugitive he had found in his field. Tell me about your farm, she said, sitting down on her pile of blankets. What do you grow? It was the first time she had asked him anything personal beyond his time as a soldier, and Bennett found himself settling in to talk. He told her about the wheat that grew in his southern fields, the vegetables he cultivated for market, the chickens that provided eggs and occasional meat. He described the rhythm of the seasons, the satisfaction of watching seeds become grain, the simple pleasure of working with his hands and seeing tangible results. You love it, Karzha observed. I can hear it in your voice. I do, Bennett admitted. It is honest work. The land does not care about politics or war or who your parents were. You put in the labor and it provides. That is a fair exchange. Orc clans think the same way, Karzha said. We believe in the value of working the land, of building things that last. We are not the savages your people think we are. I know, Bennett said quietly. I saw orc farms during the war, saw families trying to protect their homes. The generals called you monsters, but you looked pretty human to me when you bled. Karzha was silent for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her blanket. The merchant I am accused of killing, she said finally. His name was Torvin Redding. He was a slaver who specialized in capturing young orcs and selling them to fighting pits in the southern cities. I tracked him for 3 months after he took my younger brother. Bennett felt his stomach tighten. What happened? I found his caravan north of Thornhaven, waited until night, then went in to free the captives. Torvin woke up, came at me with a sword. We fought, and I killed him. His guards killed me, or tried to. Karzha touched her side where the ribs had been cracked. I got the captives out, my brother included, and sent them running west while I led the pursuit south. The guards must have found Torvin's body and created the story about the murdered family. Easier to hunt me if I am a monster rather than someone seeking justice. Where is your brother now? Bennett asked. Safe with our clan, I hope, Karzha said. If he made it back across the border, I have no way to know. Bennett absorbed this, the pieces of the story falling into place. So you are not a murderer. You are a sister who saved her brother. I killed a man, Karzha said flatly. Whether he deserved it or not, that is the truth, and the law does not care about my reasons. The law should care, Bennett said with quiet intensity. If it does not, then the law is broken. Karzha looked at him with something like wonder. You truly believe that? I do, Bennett said. I have seen enough injustice to know it when I see it. What Torvin was doing was evil and you stopped him. That does not make you a criminal. It makes you brave. Brave or foolish, Karzha said, but there was less bitterness in her voice now. The end result is the same. I am here, hiding in your cellar, and you are risking your life to protect me. I have done worse things for worse reasons, Bennett said. He stood, brushing dust from his trousers. I should let you sleep. The days are short now, but I will try to come down at midday with lunch so you are not alone for too long. I do not mind the solitude, Karzha said, but I would not mind the company either. It became a routine, those midday visits. Bennett would finish his morning chores and descend into the cellar with bread and cheese, cold meat and preserved fruit, and they would talk while Karzha ate. She told him about growing up in an orc clan on the northern frontier, about learning to hunt and track from her father, about the deep bonds of family that held orc society together. Bennett shared his own memories of childhood on the farm, of learning to plant and harvest from his father, of the quiet satisfaction of a life lived close to the land. They discovered unexpected common ground. Both had lost parents young. Both valued loyalty and honesty above social graces. Both had seen enough of war to hate it. Karzha had a dry sense of humor that caught Bennett off guard and made him laugh, while he found himself sharing observations about farming and weather that made her smile. The conversations grew easier, more natural, until Bennett found himself looking forward to those hours in the cellar with an anticipation that had nothing to do with duty or obligation. December brought deep cold and heavy snows. Bennett woke one morning to find drifts 3 feet high blocking his door, the world transformed into a landscape of white silence. He dug himself out and spent the day ensuring his animals were fed and warm, that his chimney was clear, that his stores remained dry and accessible. The isolation was complete now. Even if he wanted to go to town, the roads were impassable. He and Karzha were alone in their small bubble of survival, cut off from the rest of the world. He told her about the snow that evening, describing the way it had reshaped his farm into strange new geometry. I doubt anyone will be coming by until the spring thaw, he said. We are truly isolated now. Is that frightening or comforting? Karzha asked. Bennett considered the question. Both, I think. I do not worry about bounty hunters anymore, but if something goes wrong, we have no help. Then we must make sure nothing goes wrong, Karzha said practically. You know this land, this climate, you have survived winters here before. True enough. Bennett pulled his coat tighter. Even in the cellar, the cold was seeping in. How are you managing? Is it too cold down here? I have been colder, Karzha said. During the winter campaigns when I tracked Torvin, I slept in snow caves and went days without fire. This is luxury by comparison. Bennett looked around the small stone cellar, at the rough walls and dirt floor, at the meager pile of blankets that served as Karzha's bed. If this is luxury, you have had a hard life. Most orcs do, Karzha said simply. We are not welcome in human lands, and our own territories grow smaller each year as your kingdoms expand. My clan moves every few years, always pushed farther north into lands where the soil is poor and the winters harsh. That is why Torvin slavers found such easy prey. Young orcs venture into human lands looking for work, for trade, and disappear into fighting pits or worse. That is not right, Bennett said. No, Karzha agreed. But it is the way things are. One orc hiding in one farmer's cellar will not change the world. Maybe not, Bennett said. But it changes things for you, and sometimes that is enough. Karzha met his eyes in the lamplight, and something passed between them, a recognition that went beyond words. Bennett felt his pulse quicken and looked away, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how the isolation had stripped away the normal barriers of society and left only the truth of two people learning to trust each other. I should go, he said, standing quickly. I need to bank the fire for the night. Bennett, Karzha said softly, are you afraid of me? No, he said honestly. I am afraid of what I am starting to feel. He climbed the stairs before she could respond, closing the trapdoor with hands that shook slightly. In the main room, he stood by the fire and tried to make sense of the tangle of emotions in his chest. He had spent 3 years alone on this farm, content with solitude, convinced that the war had burned away any capacity for connection. But Karzha had somehow slipped past his defenses, had become more than a fugitive he was sheltering, more than a responsibility he had taken on. She had become someone he cared about, someone whose smile made his days brighter, whose presence he craved with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified him. It was impossible, of course. She was orc, he was human, and the world had very clear opinions about such connections. Even if they both survived the winter, even if they managed to get her to safety, there was no future in what he was feeling. She would return to her clan, he would return to his farm, and that would be the end of it. But knowing something was impossible did not make the feeling go away. Bennett threw himself into work with renewed intensity over the following days, as if physical labor could burn away the confusion in his heart. He repaired tools, organized his barn, checked and rechecked his supplies. He kept his visits to the cellar brief and businesslike, bringing food and water but avoiding the long conversations that had become so precious to him. Karzha noticed, of course. She was too observant not to. But she did not push, did not demand explanations, just accepted the meals he brought with quiet thanks and let him retreat back upstairs. Her restraint made it worse somehow, made Bennett feel like a coward for running from something he barely understood. The solstice came and went, the longest night of the year. Bennett marked it alone by his fire, drinking the last of his father's whiskey and thinking about all the turnings his life had taken to bring him to this moment. He had been a boy on this farm, a soldier in a foreign land, a man broken by violence and trying to rebuild himself in the quiet rhythms of agriculture. And now he was a fugitive by association, sheltering an orc woman in his cellar and feeling things he had no right to feel. The whiskey made him honest, and the honesty made him brave. He grabbed the bottle and a second cup, then descended into the cellar. Karzha looked up in surprise as he settled himself on the floor across from her, setting down the cups and pouring generous measures of amber liquid. "What is this?" she asked. "Solstice," Bennett said. "Longest night of the year. In my family, we always marked it with a drink and honest conversation. Seems appropriate." Karzha accepted the cup, sniffing the whiskey with cautious appreciation. "What shall we drink to?" "Survival," Bennett said. "And to unlikely friendships." "I will drink to that." Karzha sipped the whiskey, her eyes widening slightly at the burn. "That is strong." "My father made it himself," Bennett said. "He always said good whiskey should make you feel alive." They drank in companionable silence for a while, the alcohol warming Bennett's chest and loosening the knot of tension that had been building for days. Finally, Karzha spoke. "Why have you been avoiding me?" "I have not been avoiding you," Bennett said, then stopped himself. "That is a lie." "I have been avoiding you." "Why?" Bennett took another drink, gathering his courage. "Because I am starting to care about you in ways that complicate everything. Because when I come down here, all I want to do is stay and talk with you for hours. Because I think about you constantly, worry about you, want to see you smile. And that terrifies me because I do not know what to do with those feelings." Karzha was very still, her amber eyes reflecting the lamplight. "And you think these feelings are wrong because I am orc and you are human?" "I think the world would say they are wrong," Bennett corrected. "What I think is that I have never met anyone like you, and the idea of you leaving in the spring makes me feel hollow inside." "Bennett." Karzha set down her cup and leaned forward. "I feel the same way. I have tried not to, tried to remember that this is temporary, that you are helping me out of kindness and nothing more. But the truth is that I look forward to your visits more than I should. That I have started to think of this cellar as home because you are the one who comes through that door. That I am falling for you despite every bit of common sense telling me that is foolish." Bennett felt his heart hammering in his chest. "This cannot work. You know that, right? Even if we both survive this, even if I get you to safety, we come from different worlds." "I know," Karzha said. "But that does not change how I feel." They sat in silence, the truth hanging between them like something physical and real. Bennett thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea, all the ways it could end in heartbreak or worse. But he also thought about the long winter months still ahead, about the fact that they were alone in this isolated valley with no one to judge or condemn them. Whatever happened when spring came, they had now. "I do not know how to do this," Bennett said quietly. "I have never courted anyone, orc or human. I have no practice at this." "Neither do I," Karzha admitted with a slight smile. "Orc courtship is very direct. If you are interested in someone, you tell them and see if they feel the same way. None of the elaborate dancing around the subject that humans seem to prefer." "That sounds simpler," Bennett said. "It is." Karzha held out her hand across the small space between them. "So let me be direct. I care about you, Bennett Frost. I want to spend what time we have together getting to know you better, and I do not want to waste these winter months pretending I feel otherwise." Bennett looked at her hand, green-skinned and strong, scarred from a lifetime of hard use. He thought about taking it, about what it would mean, about the line he would be crossing. Then he thought about the alternative, about spending the rest of the winter in careful distance, about the regret he would feel when she was gone. He took her hand. Her skin was warm and rough, her grip firm. Bennett felt something settle into place inside him, a rightness that defied all logic and convention. "I care about you too," he said. "I do not know what we are doing or where this can possibly go, but I want to find out." Karzha's smile was radiant, transforming her face from merely striking to genuinely beautiful. "Then we will find out together." They talked through the rest of the night, the whiskey bottle slowly emptying as they shared stories and dreams, fears and hopes. Bennett told her about the farm he wanted to build, about plans for expanding his fields and maybe raising horses. Karzha described the orc crafts she had learned from her mother. the intricate beadwork and leatherworking that her people practiced during the long winter months. They discovered shared opinions on everything from the best way to prepare venison to the beauty of snow-covered pine trees. As the lamp oil ran low, and the first hints of dawn crept through the cracks around the cellar door, Bennett finally stood to leave. Karzha rose with him and they stood close in the dimness. "Thank you," she said softly, "for your honesty, for not running away from this." "Thank you for being patient with me while I figured things out," Bennett said. He reached out hesitantly and touched her cheek, marveling at the softness of her skin. "I will see you at breakfast." "I will be here," Karzha said with gentle humor. "I am not going anywhere." Bennett climbed the stairs feeling lighter than he had in days, maybe in years. The isolation he had once valued now felt like a blessing, a gift of time away from the judging eyes of the world. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The winter deepened, and with it, their connection. Bennett brought projects down to the cellar to work on while they talked, mending harnesses and sharpening tools while Karzha worked on leathercraft she created from scraps he brought her. She had a remarkable eye for detail and design, creating intricate patterns that seemed to flow naturally from her hands. Bennett found himself mesmerized watching her work, the careful precision of her movements, the small, satisfied smile when a piece came out particularly well. They talked about everything and nothing. Karzha taught him words in the Orc language, guttural and harsh to his ear at first but growing musical as he learned the rhythms. He taught her songs from his childhood, ballads about harvest and home that his mother had sung. They argued good-naturedly about the best way to train a horse, the proper time to plant spring wheat, whether venison or pork made better stew. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other in more intimate ways. Bennett discovered that Karzha laughed at terrible jokes, that she hummed while she worked, that she had a fierce, sweet tooth, and hoarded the preserved peaches he brought her. Karzha learned that Bennett talked to his animals when he thought no one could hear, that he had a habit of running his hand through his hair when he was thinking hard, that he made the same terrible jokes she laughed at specifically to hear her laugh. The physical distance between them shrank gradually. Sitting side by side became normal, then sitting with shoulders touching, then Bennett's arm around her shoulders while they talked late into the night. He had been worried about the differences between them, about whether her orcish features would feel strange or foreign. Instead, he found her tusks endearing, loved the way her pointed ears twitched when she was amused, thought her green skin was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The first time they kissed was in early January, during a blizzard that howled around the house and made the lamp flame dance despite being enclosed in glass. They had been sitting close, talking quietly, when Karzha simply leaned in and pressed her lips to his. Bennett froze for a heartbeat, then melted into it, his hand coming up to cup her face as he kissed her back. Her tusks were strange against his face but not unpleasant, just different, just part of what made her herself. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Karzha smiled. "I have wanted to do that for weeks." "Why did you wait?" Bennett asked, his thumb stroking her cheek. "I wanted to be sure you wanted it too," Karzha said. "I did not want to push you into something you were not ready for." "I am ready," Bennett said, and kissed her again to prove it. They were careful despite the isolation, aware that discovery would mean death for both of them. But within the privacy of the cellar, they allowed themselves to be simply two people falling in love, without the weight of prejudice and history bearing down on them. Bennett brought down his bedroll and slept in the cellar most nights, curled around Karzha in a nest of blankets, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. They made plans, impossible, wonderful plans. Bennett talked about the Western territories where mixed communities existed, where humans and orcs traded, and sometimes intermarried, without the hostility that defined the Eastern kingdoms. Karzha described the routes she knew, the safe houses and friendly way stations that could get them there. It was all speculation, built on hope and wishful thinking, but it gave them something to reach for beyond the immediate struggle of survival. February came with more snow and howling winds that piled drifts against the house and barn. Bennett spent hours each day digging paths, ensuring his animals were fed and warm, maintaining the fragile infrastructure that kept them alive. The work was exhausting, but he did it with a song in his heart because he knew Karzha was waiting for him in the cellar, that he would end each day in her arms. One evening as they lay together in the lamplight, Karzha tracing patterns on his chest with her fingertips, she said quietly, "When this is over, when we make it west, what do you want to do?" Bennett considered the question. "I want to farm. It is what I know, what I love. But I want to do it somewhere we can be together openly without hiding. I want neighbors who will not care that my wife is an orc." "Wife," Karzha repeated softly. "You think that far ahead, do you not?" Bennett turned to look at her. "I know it is fast. I know the circumstances are strange, but yes, I think about marrying you, about building a life together that is more than hiding in a cellar." Karzha's eyes were bright in the lamplight. In orc culture, marriage is a choice made by two people, witnessed by the clan. There are no elaborate ceremonies, just a declaration of commitment and the giving of gifts. I have no clan here, no gifts to give you, but I can make the declaration. I choose you, Bennett Frost. I choose this life we are building together, however strange and uncertain it may be. Bennett felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I choose you too, Karzha. You are the bravest, strongest, most amazing person I have ever met, and I want to spend my life with you." They sealed the promise with a kiss that turned into something deeper, a physical affirmation of the bond they had forged. Afterward, lying tangled together in the blankets, Bennett felt a peace he had not known since before the war. He had found his home, and it was not a place but a person. March brought the first hints of thaw, water dripping from icicles and running in small rivulets through the snow. Bennett watched the signs with mixed feelings. The end of winter meant freedom from the isolation, but it also meant the return of danger, the need to move Karzha to safety before the bounty hunters resumed their search. He began making quiet preparations, setting aside supplies for travel, studying maps of the western routes. They were lying together one afternoon discussing the best time to leave when Bennett heard the sound he had been dreading. Voices outside the house, the crunch of boots on crusted snow. He sat up quickly, pressing a finger to Karzha's lips. "Someone is here. Stay completely silent." He climbed the stairs and closed the trapdoor, throwing the rug over it with practiced speed. Then he moved to the door, wiping the panic from his face and replacing it with mild curiosity. He opened the door to find 4 men standing in his yard, all armed, all wearing the hard look of professional bounty hunters. The leader was the same scarred man who had searched his barn in the fall, and recognition lit his cold eyes. "Frost, we meet again." "So we do," Bennett said calmly. "I thought you all went south for the winter." "Most did," the man agreed. "But I had a feeling about this area, decided to winter in Millhaven and keep asking questions. You know what I heard? That you have been buying more food than a man living alone should need. That you purchased a woman's coat in December. That you have been oddly secretive, turning down invitations to winter gatherings, keeping to yourself more than usual." Bennett felt ice in his veins but kept his expression mildly annoyed. "I keep to myself because I prefer my own company. And I am not answerable to you or anyone else for my purchases." "True enough," the hunter said. But you are answerable to the law, and I have a writ here giving me authority to search any property where the fugitive might be hiding. So step aside, Frost, and let us do our job." Bennett had no choice but to step back, watching with carefully controlled fear as the four men entered his house and began a methodical search. They tore through his main room, his bedroom, checked the chimney, and examined every corner. One of them poked at the rug in the kitchen, and Bennett's heart stopped, but the man just kicked it aside and kept moving. "Check the barn," the leader ordered, and two men tramped outside. The remaining two continued searching the house while Bennett stood by the fire, every muscle tense. The rug was displaced, the trapdoor partially visible. If anyone looked closely, really looked, they would see it. The hunters returned from the barn empty-handed, shaking their heads. The leader walked through the kitchen, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. He stopped near the trapdoor, looking down. Bennett prepared to fight, to die if necessary to give Karzha a chance to escape. His hand inched toward the poker by the fireplace. Then one of the other hunters called from the bedroom, "Found something here," and the leader turned away from the kitchen. Bennett released a breath he had not known he was holding. The men regrouped in the main room, the one from the bedroom holding up a book. "Journal," he said. "Found it under the mattress. Might have something useful." The leader flipped through it, and Bennett's mind raced. The journal was his, had been for years, but he could not remember what he had written. Had he mentioned Karzha? Had he been foolish enough to record something incriminating? After a long, tense moment, the leader closed the journal and tossed it back to his man. Nothing, just farming notes and weather observations. He looked at Bennett with frustration. "You are clean, Frost, for now, but I am watching you. Something about this does not sit right." "Your instincts are your business," Bennett said. "But I have work to do, so if you are finished." The hunters filed out, the leader pausing at the door. "That orc is out there somewhere, and someone is helping her. When I find out who, they will hang alongside her. Remember that." Bennett waited until they were gone, until the sound of their horses faded completely, before allowing himself to collapse against the wall. His hands were shaking, his heart racing. They had come so close, impossibly close. If that hunter had looked down at the rug, had noticed the trapdoor, everything would have ended in blood and death. He waited a full hour before opening the cellar, needing to be absolutely certain the hunters were not watching the house. When he finally descended, he found Karzha sitting with her back against the wall, her face pale but composed. "They are gone," Bennett said. "But Karzha, we cannot stay here anymore. They are suspicious, they are watching. We need to leave as soon as the roads are passable." "I heard everything," Karzha said quietly. "I am so sorry, Bennett. I have brought this danger to your door, put your life at risk." "We are past apologies," Bennett said, kneeling beside her and taking her hands. "We knew the risks, but we need to be smart now. Another week, maybe two, and the roads west will be clear enough to travel. We gather supplies, we plan our route, and we disappear before they come back." "Running will make you a fugitive too," Karzha pointed out. "Your farm, your life here, you will lose everything." "I will lose everything if they hang me for harboring you," Bennett countered. "And I will lose what matters most if they take you from me. The farm is just land, just things. You are what I cannot replace." Karzha pulled him into a fierce embrace, and they held each other in the lamplight, drawing strength from their connection. "Then we run," she said, "together, and we build a new life in the West." They spent the next week in careful preparation. Bennett sold some of his livestock in town, claiming he was reducing his herd for the summer. He bought horses suitable for long-distance travel, camping gear, preserved food that would not spoil. He spread a story about visiting his cousin in the southern provinces, establishing a false trail. Every action was calculated to avoid suspicion while getting them ready to disappear. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy when every instinct screamed to run immediately. Bennett forced himself to keep his routines, to chat casually with neighbors at the market, to give no sign that anything had changed. Meanwhile, in the cellar, Karzha prepared herself mentally for the journey ahead, exercising to build her strength, studying the maps Bennett brought down. They set their departure for the first day of April, when the roads would be passable, but before the bounty hunters would expect anyone to move. The night before they were to leave, Bennett loaded the horses and did a final check of supplies. Everything was ready. At dawn, they would ride west and leave this life behind forever. He descended into the cellar one last time, finding Karzha already dressed in the traveling clothes he had brought her, the wool coat buttoned against the early spring chill. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I am terrified," Karzha admitted. "But yes, I am ready." "We will make it," Bennett said with more confidence than he felt. "We will ride hard, stay off the main roads, and be across the border before anyone realizes we are gone." They went upstairs together, Karzha emerging from the cellar for the first time in months. She stood in the main room of the house, looking around with wide eyes at the space she had heard described but never seen. "It is strange," she said softly, "being up here, seeing the home you talked about." "It was a home," Bennett said, looking around at the furniture his grandfather had built, the hearth where 4 generations had gathered. "But it is just a place now. Home is where you are." They extinguished the lamps and prepared to slip out into the pre-dawn darkness. Bennett opened the door, then froze. Torches burned in his yard, at least a dozen of them, held by armed men who had surrounded the house in silence. At the front stood the scarred bounty hunter, and his smile was triumphant. "Did you really think I would not watch your house, Frost?" The man called. "Did you think I would not notice you selling livestock and buying traveling supplies? I knew you were hiding her. I just needed to wait for you to flush her out." Bennett's mind raced through options. They were surrounded, outnumbered, with no avenue of escape. Fighting would be suicide. Surrender would mean the noose for both of them. But there had to be something, some way out. Karzha stepped up beside him, her hand finding his. "I will not let them take us without a fight," she said quietly. "No," Bennett agreed. "Neither will I." The bounty hunter laughed. "Touching. The human and the orc, doomed lovers. It would make a decent ballad if you were not both about to hang. Come out peacefully, and I will make it quick. Force me to come in there, and I promise you will die slow." Bennett looked at Karzha, at the woman he loved more than his own life, and made a decision born of desperation and rage. "The cellar," he said. "There is a tunnel my grandfather built during the border wars, comes out in the barn. If we can make it there, get to the horses, they will have men at the barn," Karzha said. "I know. But it is a chance, and that is more than we have here." They ran for the kitchen as the first bounty hunter kicked in the door. Bennett grabbed the poker from the fireplace and swung it in a wide arc, catching the man across the temple and dropping him. 2 more pushed through, and Karzha was there, fighting with the fierce skill she had learned protecting her brother. Her fists connected with brutal precision, and one hunter went down hard, but there were too many. Bennett felt a club crack across his shoulders, driving him to his knees. He saw Karzha grappling with 2 men, saw her land a stunning blow to one's jaw before the other got an arm around her throat. He struggled to his feet, swinging the poker wildly, connecting with ribs and arms but unable to reach her. The scarred leader entered the house with his sword drawn. "Enough," he barked. "Stand down or I start cutting pieces off your girlfriend." Bennett froze, the poker raised. Karzha was being held by 3 men now, her arms pinned, blood running from a cut above her eye. The leader's sword was at her throat. "Drop the weapon," the hunter said coldly. "Last chance." Bennett looked into Karzha's eyes and saw acceptance there, saw her preparing for death with the same courage she had shown in everything. He could not let it end like this. He would not. He dropped the poker. The hunters swarmed them, binding their hands with rough rope. Bennett was forced to his knees beside Karzha, surrounded by armed men with torches painting the scene in hellish orange light. The leader walked around them slowly, savoring his victory. "I will admit, you had me going for a while," he said to Bennett. "Played the innocent farmer well. But greed always wins in the end. 500 gold sovereigns is enough to make a man patient." "I did not do this for gold," Bennett spat. "I did it because it was right." "Right," the hunter laughed. "Hiding a murderer, lying to lawful authorities, preparing to flee justice." "You have a strange definition of right, Frost." "She is not a murderer," Bennett said. "The man she killed was a slaver who took her brother. She was seeking justice when your law would not provide it." "Her version of events," the hunter dismissed. "The courts will sort out the truth. Our job is just to bring her in." He gestured to his men. "Get them on horses. We ride for Millhaven at first light." As the hunters hauled them to their feet, Bennett felt despair threatening to overwhelm him. They had been so close to freedom, so close to the life they had planned. Now it would all end on a scaffold in Millhaven, their love condemned as unnatural, their choices judged by those who had never walked their path. Then he heard a sound that froze every man in the yard. A horn, low and resonant, echoing from the tree line to the north. It was answered by another horn, then another, until the night was filled with their call. The bounty hunters turned, raising their torches, peering into the darkness beyond the firelight. Shapes emerged from the shadows. Orcs, dozens of them, melting out of the forest with weapons drawn and grim purpose in their eyes. They were warriors, scarred and battle-hardened, and they advanced with the coordinated precision of a trained war band. At their head walked an orc man who looked remarkably like Karzha, younger but with the same amber eyes and fierce expression. "Karzha," the young orc shouted. "We followed your trail from the north. We came as soon as we could." "Draken," Karzha breathed, and Bennett saw joy and terror warring in her face. "You should not have come. There are too many, they will kill you." "We are not leaving without you," Draken said, and his warriors formed a line facing the bounty hunters. The humans were outnumbered now, and the confidence drained from their faces as they realized the tables had turned. The scarred leader drew his sword. "Stand down," he ordered the orcs. "This is a lawful arrest. You have no authority here." "We have the authority of blood and family," Draken said. "My sister saved my life, saved the lives of 15 other orcs from your slavers. We will not see her hanged for that." The tension ratcheted higher, weapons raised on both sides, the air thick with the promise of violence. Bennett could see it spiraling toward massacre, could see the bounty hunters desperate enough to fight even knowing they would likely die. Good people on both sides about to kill each other over laws and prejudices that should never have existed. "Wait," Bennett called out, his voice cutting through the standoff. "There is another way." Both groups turned to look at him. The scarred hunter laughed bitterly. "What way is that, Frost? You going to negotiate our surrender?" "I am going to offer you a choice," Bennett said. "You want 500 gold for bringing in Karzha. I cannot match that, but I can offer you my farm. 40 acres of good land, a solid house, barn, and livestock. Worth at least 400 gold if you sell it right. Let us go, and it is yours." The hunter's eyes narrowed. "You would give up everything you own." "It is just land," Bennett said, echoing his earlier words to Karzha. "I can farm anywhere, but I cannot get back a life once it is taken. So yes, I will give you everything to buy our freedom." The hunter looked around at the grim orc warriors, at his own nervous men, calculating odds and outcomes. Finally, he sheathed his sword. "Cut them loose," he ordered his men. "We are taking the farm." "What?" one of the other hunters protested. "We can fight them. We can. We can die for a bounty that is worth nothing if we are dead," the leader interrupted. "I would rather have 400 gold in my life than 500 gold and a funeral. Cut them loose." The ropes binding Bennett and Karzha were cut. They stood together, barely believing it was happening as the bounty hunters backed toward the house. The leader pulled out a parchment and a pen. "Sign the deed over to me, Frost. Make it legal so there is no questions later." Bennett signed with shaking hands, watching his inheritance, his home, his entire life disappear with a few strokes of ink. But when he looked at Karzha standing beside him, at the orc warriors who had come to save her, at Draken's fierce protective stance, he felt no regret. He had traded a place for a future, and it was the best bargain he had ever made. "It is done," he said, handing back the deed. "The farm is yours. Now we leave and you do not follow." "Agreed," the hunter said. He looked at Karzha with something like grudging respect. "You have loyal friends, orc. Use that loyalty well." The bounty hunters retreated into the house, barricading themselves inside until the orcs were gone. Draken approached Bennett and Karzha, his amber eyes studying the human carefully. "You are the one who hid my sister all winter." "I am," Bennett said, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I would do it again." "She told me about you," Draken said, "in the message she sent when the roads cleared. She said you were a good man, that you risked everything for her." "I did not believe a human could be trusted, but I see now she was right." He extended his hand in the orc gesture of respect, forearm to forearm. "You are welcome among our clan, Bennett Frost." Bennett clasped his forearm, feeling the strength and sincerity of the grip. "Thank you. And thank you for coming. We would both be dead without you." "You are family now," Draken said simply. "We protect our family." The orc war band escorted them north through the forest, moving with swift efficiency through terrain that would have taken Bennett days to navigate alone. Karzha rode beside her brother, the two of them talking rapidly in their own language, clearly overjoyed to be reunited. Bennett rode slightly behind, still processing the rapid reversal of their fortunes. They traveled for 3 days, moving deeper into the wild lands beyond human settlement. The landscape grew wilder, more beautiful pine forests giving way to high meadows dotted with spring wildflowers. On the evening of the 3rd day, they crested a ridge and Bennett saw the orc settlement spread below. It was nothing like the savage camps human stories described. Sturdy wooden houses with sod roofs were arranged in a loose circle around a central fire pit, with gardens and livestock pens organized with clear purpose. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Bennett could hear the sounds of normal life, children playing, someone singing, the rhythmic sound of a hammer on metal. "Welcome to our clan," Karzha said, riding up beside him. "It is not much, but it is home." "It looks wonderful," Bennett said honestly. The clan received them with caution at first. The warriors vouched for Bennett, explained how he had sheltered Karzha through the winter, how he had given up everything to save her. The clan leader, an older orc woman with white streaked hair and keen eyes, listened to the story, then studied Bennett for a long moment. "You love my daughter's friend," she said finally. "It was not a question." "I love Karzha more than my own life," Bennett said. "I know our peoples do not usually mix. I know it is strange, but my feelings are true." The clan leader looked at Karzha. "And you? Do you return this feeling?" "I do," Karzha said, taking Bennett's hand. "He is the best man I have ever known, orc or human. I want to build a life with him if the clan will accept it." The old woman smiled and her whole face transformed. "Then the clan accepts it. We judge people by their actions, not their birth. Bennett Frost has proven himself worthy. He is one of us now. The celebration that night was unlike anything Bennett had experienced. The whole clan gathered around the central fire, sharing food and drink and stories. He was introduced to what felt like 100 orcs, all of them curious about the human who had loved one of their own enough to give up everything. Karzha never left his side, translating when needed, her hand always finding his. As the night deepened and the fire burned low, Karzha's mother approached them with a small wooden box. "In our tradition," she explained, "when two people declare their intention to build a life together, they exchange tokens. Since you have no token to offer, I gift you this on behalf of the clan." She opened the box to reveal a beautifully crafted knife with a bone handle, the blade etched with intricate designs. "This was my mate's, Karzha's father. He would have liked you, I think. Would have respected a man who protected his daughter." Bennett accepted the knife with reverence, feeling the weight of the gift. "I will treasure it, and I swear to you I will spend my life making Karzha happy." "I believe you," the old woman said. She turned to Karzha. "And for you, daughter of my heart, I offer my blessing. May your union be strong, may your love endure, and may you find the peace you have both earned." Karzha embraced her mother figure, tears streaming down her green cheeks. "Thank you, for everything, for raising me, for accepting him, for being my family." They were married 3 days later in the orc tradition, standing before the clan and declaring their commitment. Karzha wore traditional orc beadwork woven into her hair, while Bennett wore a shirt embroidered by the clan's craftspeople with symbols of home and harvest. They spoke their vows in both human common tongue and the orc language, binding their lives together before two communities. The celebration lasted long into the night, but eventually, Bennett and Karzha slipped away to the small house the clan had prepared for them. It was simple but sturdy, with a good hearth and comfortable furnishings, and it represented a future Bennett had barely dared to dream about. "So," Karzha said, closing the door behind them, "we are married. How does it feel? Like coming home?" Bennett said, pulling her into his arms. "Like everything I have been through, every hard choice and sacrifice was leading me here to you." "I feel the same way," Karzha said, resting her head against his chest. "When I was running from those hunters, when I thought I would die alone in the wilderness, I never imagined this. Never imagined finding someone who would see past what I am to who I am. Never imagined love." "Well, now you have it," Bennett said, kissing the top of her head. "And I have you, and we have a whole life ahead of us to figure out what comes next." They stood together in the firelight, two people from different worlds who had found each other against impossible odds. Outside, the clan celebrated their union, the sound of drums and laughter carrying on the spring wind. But inside their small house, Bennett and Karzha simply held each other, grateful for the present and hopeful for the future. The seasons turned, and they built their life together among the clan. Bennett taught the orcs new farming techniques he had learned on his family's land, helping them improve their yields and diversify their crops. Karzha worked as a hunter and scout, using her tracking skills to keep the clan fed and safe. Together, they became an integral part of the community, their mixed marriage no longer strange but simply another part of the clan's story. Bennett learned the orc language fluently, participated in their ceremonies, and taught the children human songs and games. The orcs taught him their crafts, their fighting techniques, their deep connection to the land and seasons. He found he fit better among them than he ever had among his own people, found acceptance and purpose that had eluded him in the human world. A year after their marriage, Karzha announced she was pregnant. The clan celebrated with characteristic enthusiasm, the elders already planning celebrations for the child who would bridge two worlds. Bennett felt terror and joy in equal measure, wondering what kind of world his child would inherit, hoping desperately it would be better than the one he and Karzha had known. Their daughter was born in the spring, during a rainstorm that washed the world clean. She had her mother's green skin and her father's blue eyes, small tusks that would grow more prominent with age, and a cry that could wake the dead. They named her Arya, a name that worked in both languages, and she became the darling of the clan. Bennett discovered that fatherhood transformed him in ways he had not anticipated. Holding his daughter, watching her grow and learn, he felt a fierce protective love that dwarfed everything else. He wanted to make the world safe for her, wanted to build bridges between orc and human so she would never have to choose between her two heritages. As Arya grew from infant to toddler, Bennett and Karzha began to think about the future in broader terms. They talked late into the night about ways to foster understanding between their peoples, about the small steps that could lead to larger change. It was Karzha who first suggested they try to establish trade with sympathetic human communities, to show that orcs and humans could work together peacefully. It took months of careful planning and negotiation. Bennett rode to the Western Territories, where he had once thought to flee, to the mixed communities where prejudice ran less deep. He talked to traders and farmers, to people who remembered him from before the war, and slowly built a network of those willing to take a chance on peace. The first trade caravan arrived at the orc settlement 2 years after Bennett's marriage, a small group of human merchants willing to exchange goods with the clan. The orcs offered furs and beautifully crafted leather goods. The humans brought tools and grain. It was a small beginning, but both sides completed the exchange without violence, and that was revolutionary. More caravans followed. The orc clan gained a reputation for fair dealing and quality crafts, while the human traders found a reliable source of goods they could not get elsewhere. Slowly, carefully, a thread of trust was woven between communities that had once been enemies. It was not perfect. Prejudices remained on both sides, but it was progress. Bennett watched these changes with quiet satisfaction, knowing he was building a better world for his daughter. Arya grew up playing with orc and human children who came with the trade caravans, learning both languages naturally, embodying the bridge between worlds that her parents represented. She had her mother's courage and her father's kindness, and she gave Bennett hope for the future. On a spring evening 5 years after he had first hidden Karzha in his root cellar, Bennett stood outside his house watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Karzha came to stand beside him, Arya balanced on her hip, and they looked out over the valley that had become their home. "Do you ever regret it?" Karzha asked softly. "Giving up your farm, your old life, everything you knew?" Bennett considered the question, looking at his wife and daughter, at the community they had built, at the changes they had helped bring about. "Not for a single moment," he said. "That farm was my past. This, you, our family, the work we are doing, this is my future. And I would not trade it for anything." "I love you," Karzha said, leaning against him. "I loved you when you hid me in your cellar. I loved you when you gave up everything to save me, and I love you now watching you build a world where our daughter can live freely. Thank you for seeing me when the world only saw a monster." "You were never a monster," Bennett said, kissing her forehead. "You were always just Karzha, brave and fierce and beautiful. I am the lucky one that you chose to love me back." Arya reached out from her mother's arms, her small hand patting Bennett's cheek. "Papa," she said, one of her first clear words, and Bennett felt his heart swell with love so intense it was almost painful. This was what he had fought for, what he had sacrificed for. Not just survival, but a life worth living. Not just freedom from persecution, but the freedom to love openly, to build something lasting, to change the world one small act of courage at a time. The sun sank below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. In the houses around them, lamps were being lit, families gathering for evening meals, the normal rhythms of life playing out in this small corner of the world where orcs and humans were learning to live together in peace. Bennett Frost had been a soldier, a farmer, a fugitive, and now he was a husband, father, and bridge builder. He had lost a farm but gained a family, had given up land but found a home, had risked everything and won more than he had ever dreamed possible. And as he stood with his wife and daughter under the emerging stars, surrounded by the community they had helped build and the peace they had helped forge, Bennett knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The story of the wanted posters that had papered the town, of the orc girl hidden in the root cellar through a long winter, had transformed into something richer and deeper. It had become a story of love that transcended prejudice, of courage in the face of impossible odds, of two people from different worlds who chose each other and in doing so, began to change the world around them. It was a story still being written, with chapters yet to come, challenges still to face, and victories yet to be won. But standing there with Karzha's warmth beside him and Arya's laughter ringing in his ears, Bennett knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough. That was everything. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and spring flowers, and somewhere in the settlement, someone began to sing. Others joined in, orc voices blending with the occasional human trader who had stayed for the evening, creating a harmony that should have been impossible but somehow worked beautifully. Bennett added his voice to the song, feeling Karzha join in beside him, their daughter listening with wide, wondering eyes. This was their life now, strange and beautiful and hard-won. This was their happily ever after, not perfect but real, built on love and sacrifice and the stubborn belief that different peoples could find common ground. And as the song swelled around them, carried on the evening breeze across the valley and up into the star-filled sky, Bennett closed his eyes and let himself feel the full weight of his gratitude. For Karzha, for Arya, for the family and community they had built, for the second chance they had all been given. The world was still broken in many ways, still divided by fear and hatred and old wounds that ran deep. But here, in this small settlement where an orc woman and a human man had dared to love each other, where their daughter grew up knowing both her heritages, where trade and friendship were slowly replacing conflict and suspicion, here there was hope. And hope, Bennett had learned, was the most powerful force in the world. It had sustained him through the darkest winter nights when discovery seemed inevitable. It had given Karzha the courage to trust a human stranger with her life. It had brought Draken and the orc warriors north to save them both. It had built bridges between enemies and transformed strangers into family. Hope had given them everything, and now they would spend their lives passing it on, showing others that a different world was possible, that love could triumph over hate, that the courage of two people choosing each other could ripple outward and change the world in ways large and small. The song ended, and in the peaceful quiet that followed, Bennett opened his eyes to find Karzha watching him with a soft smile. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am," Bennett said simply. "How one choice to help someone in trouble led to all of this. How the best decision I ever made was hiding an orc girl in my root cellar and falling in love with her. The best decision I ever made was trusting you," Karzha replied. "Was believing that not all humans were enemies, that one grumpy farmer might just be the answer to everything I never knew I needed." They laughed together, and Arya joined in without knowing why, her childish giggles pure and joyful. It was a perfect moment, the kind that Bennett wanted to hold onto forever, to preserve against the inevitable challenges and hardships that life would bring. But he did not need to hold on to it, he realized. Moments like this would keep coming, because they had built a life that created them naturally. Every evening watching the sunset together, every meal shared with their clan family, every milestone in areas growing up, every small victory in building peace between their peoples, these would all be perfect moments worth cherishing. The future stretched ahead of them, unknown and full of possibility. There would be hard times, certainly. Prejudice would not disappear overnight, and there would always be those on both sides who opposed what Bennett and Karzha represented. There would be struggles and setbacks, disappointments and sorrows. But there would also be joy and love, friendship and community, the satisfaction of meaningful work, and the comfort of coming home to the people who mattered most. There would be watching Arya grow into her own person, strong and proud of both her heritages. There would be the quiet pleasure of working the land alongside Karzha, of building something that would outlast them both. There would be life, full and rich and worth every sacrifice they had made to achieve it. As the night deepened and the air grew cold, they went inside to the warmth of their hearth. Bennett built up the fire while Karzha put Arya to bed, singing her a lullaby that blended orc and human melodies. He stood in the doorway watching them, his heart full to bursting with love for these two people who had become his whole world. When Arya was asleep, Karzha joined him by the fire, and they sat together in comfortable silence, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. The fire crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and outside the wind whispered through the pines. "Thank you," Bennett said quietly. "For what? For everything. For surviving long enough for me to find you, for trusting me when you had every reason not to, for loving me back. For giving me Arya, for this life we have built together, for all of it." Karzha lifted her head to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "You saved my life, Bennett, in every way a person can be saved. You gave me shelter when I was hunted. You gave me love when I was alone. You gave me a future when I thought I had none. I should be thanking you." "Then we will thank each other," Bennett said, pulling her close. "And we will spend the rest of our lives being grateful for what we have." "That sounds perfect," Karzha murmured, settling back against him. They sat by the fire until it burned low, talking occasionally but mostly just enjoying the peace of being together. Outside, the settlement gradually grew quiet as families settled in for the night. In the distance, a night bird called, and somewhere closer, a child laughed before being shushed by a parent. It was all so beautifully, wonderfully ordinary. The life Bennett had dreamed of during those long years of war, the peace Karzha had sought when she set out to save her brother. It was all here in this moment, this place, this simple evening by the fire. When they finally went to bed, Bennett lay awake for a while, listening to Karzha's steady breathing beside him and Arya's soft snores from her small bed in the corner. His family, safe and warm and together. Everything he had worked for, everything he had risked, had led to this. He thought about the wanted posters that had started it all, about the terrified fugitive he had found in his field, about the long winter of hiding and slowly falling in love. He thought about the bounty hunters and the near escapes, about giving up his farm and finding a new home among the orcs. He thought about all the twists and turns that had brought him here, to this bed in this house in this life, and he smiled, knowing that he would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every hard choice, every terrifying moment, every sacrifice had been worth it for this. For Karzha sleeping beside him, for Arya dreaming in the corner, for the family and community they had built, for the love that had transformed them both. The world outside might still be broken, might still be filled with those who would condemn their love and fear their daughter. But here, in this small house in an orc settlement in the wild lands, they had created something unbreakable. They had created home, and that, Bennett thought as sleep finally claimed him, was the greatest treasure of all.